Hello, my friends. Welcome to EdTech with Adam. I'm super excited, and I hope you are too. Today is the day we're finally going to do the large, massive comparison of all of these different collaborative annotation and group reading platforms. Now, I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube of people saying that, oh, this is the best platform, this is the best thing you can use, and honestly, there is no best platform. All of these different apps all function in their own ways. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages, and some of them are going to work for your specific teaching environment, and some of them are not. So that's something that we really need to consider here. Let's jump right into it with the most important things. First of all, let's start by talking about compliancy, because this is really one of the biggest factors when we're trying to start using one of these new apps in our classroom, because depending on whether it's compliant or not, it could be a no-go right from the get-go. So let's start off with FIPA compliancy. So in Canada, everything needs to be FIPA compliant, which means all the students' data needs to be stored in Canada, so on Canadian servers. And there are a few other things as well in regards to privacy and whatnot. So as you can see from this, only a small handful of these platforms can actually qualify as being FIPA compliant right now. So we have collaborative learning notes and we have the Microsoft suite. And this is something, again, if you want to use one of these platforms and they aren't FIPA compliant and you're in Canada, you can still use it. However, if you want to use it above board and not get in trouble with your school board or with your university, you could potentially ask your IT team to take a look at it and see if they can bring this platform into your institution. Again, just a heads up, it might take months, it might even take years, because right now with COVID-19, everything is pretty slow in the IT departments and all that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of understand that, but it's not impossible. But then if you're in the United States and you need to follow FERPA compliancy, the good news is all of these platforms are FERPA compliant. All of them follow the rules and regulations. However, just another heads up, just because it's FERPA compliant and just because the website and the company says that it's FERPA compliant, it might have to go through state specific or even school district specific guidelines or practices for privacy impact assessments in order for it to be used at your school district. So that's something that you also have to consider. But again, just talk with your IT staff and they should be able to help you with that. So the next thing, of course, is price. And this is one thing, again, I've talked with a lot of teachers, a lot of my colleagues. This is really a make or break thing, because a lot of teachers right now are finding their own platforms. They're finding their own ways to use these, which means they have to use their own dollar to get there. So looking at this here, we can see that most of these platforms are free for individual student and teacher use. One thing to have a heads up on, though, is a lot of these platforms are providing free services right now only during the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of them are only offering them until July. So if you want to verify that, you can also get in touch with them. A lot of them have already posted on their websites whether or not they'll remain free, but the ones that I have listed here will likely remain free for the time being and into the future here. However, as you can see, ones like Kamiap are charging $99 a year per user, and that includes all of the students. So if you have all the students, you don't have to pay any extra for them. However, apps like Feedbackfruits Comprehension, for example, and even Hypothesis and a few others here, for institutional purposes, a lot of them, well, actually all of them here, charge an extra fee, for example, for going together with your learning management system or doing things like rostering, so getting all your students listed for you, all that kind of stuff. So if you're using it by yourself, if you're using it individually, for the most part, probably have some free options. But if you want to use it at your school district with a whole bunch of other people, likely you will have to pay for it. And another exception to this, if you look to the end there, is the Microsoft suite. While there are free and paid versions of all of these platforms, they have different features. And as we discussed, and you can see the video about that, the paid features are quite a bit more robust, even in terms of collaborative annotation. You can still do it in the free version, but it might not be as nice. So again, something you want to look into. The next most important thing is also almost as important as the previous two, and that is whether or not the platform is available on the learning management system that you're currently using at your school, institute, or university. Because a lot of these places already have learning management systems in place, and a lot of these platforms have already been designed to go together with some specific learning management systems, except for, of course, the Google Suite and Microsoft Suite, which have billions of dollars to put into really developing what we call LTI, which is learning technology interoperability. And that's something that allows these platforms to go together and be embedded within all the learning management systems. Now, one exception to this is if the platform can be used as a standalone tool. In that case, it doesn't matter which learning management system you're using. And as you can see, every one of the platforms, except for Feedbackfruits, can be used as a standalone platform. Now, this means that you wouldn't be able to enjoy some of the benefits that you'd get with LTI. So for example, with Canvas, if you have it integrated with one of these platforms, you can use things like SpeedGrader together with it, which is really cool. But again, this is just one of the things that you have to kind of weigh in the pros and cons of using it as a standalone platform or using it together with your LMS. Speaking of LMSs, let's take a look at which ones are really compatible with which of these platforms. So first of all, starting with CommiApp, you can see that it works with a lot of the major LMSs, but it still isn't functional with Brightspace, Moodle, Blackboard, or Sakai. Feedbackfruits is available with yet another mix of LMSs, but is not compatible with Google Classroom, Schoology, or Sakai. Hypothesis here has been around for a while, and they have developed a lot of interoperability, and the only one that they don't work with is Google Classroom. Collaborative Learning Notes is still a relatively new platform, and as you can see, it works with Canvas. However, it doesn't work with all of the other platforms. And finally, Perusall works with almost every single one of these LMSs except for Google Classroom. Now, for a lot of these platforms, the reason why they built in the ability to work with some of these platforms is mostly because of demand. So if schools demand they want to use this platform, but it's not available on a certain learning management system, then that platform is likely going to develop what they need in order to work together with that platform. So again, if you want to use one of these platforms, but it's not available on the learning management system you're currently using, contact your IT department. They can likely start a process where they could begin making requests to the platform to work with them, and they could also, from their end, contact the learning management system and get something working, because that's what often happens in this industry. Now, let's look at the types of resources you can import. Now, as you can see across the board, you can really import a lot of text-based resources very freely. So PDFs, docx's, HTML, things like you copy and paste, like the ones that I showed you in the demo videos. Just a few exceptions. So for example, Hypothesis doesn't list docx as one of their formats. However, that's an easy workaround. You can just copy and paste from a website or from a text file. Really doesn't matter. And Collaborative Learning Notes, also, they don't have the direct import features. However, you can copy and paste PDFs and docx's very simply. However, where a lot of these platforms differ is the ability to annotate pictures. So if you want to take a historical picture for a social studies class or something, and you want your students to annotate it and have discussions, that is only going to be available in about half of these platforms. So in CommiApp, the Google Suite platforms, and the Microsoft Suite platforms. So for example, if you're an art teacher or art history teacher and you specifically want to do picture annotations, well, you have a few limitations here that you have to be aware of. Finally, one of my favorite things, and basically the grounds for most of this entire video series, are the features. How do the features differ? So as we can see, I made this entire series for collaborative annotation and being able to respond and have these dialogues with collaborative annotation. So across the board, those ones are all yeses. All these platforms can do that. However, where they start to differ is where we get to things like filtering. So for example, in a handful of these platforms, we cannot filter out different student responses. So for example, in the Google Suite and the Microsoft Suite products, we can't do that. And in some of the other ones like CommiApp and Feedbackfruits, they have a few little strange little details of things like if one person annotates and another student responds, and I want to see this student, the responding students' annotations or responses, sometimes they won't let me filter those out. Like if I filter them, they only filter by the annotation, but not by responses. Or if responses are attached in some way or another, sometimes they don't work and vice versa. It's a very kind of strange system, but that's something that we need to be aware of, especially if we're using Commiap, Feedbackfruits, and also Perusall, as you can see here. However, almost all of them allow us to identify who said what in the text somehow, in some way. And like I mentioned, there are a few loopholes here and there that you can use to identify individual student responses, but for the most part, you can pick them out in the text. Now, how about editing the original text? Well, as I mentioned, this isn't something you really want unless you're doing collaborative writing. And as you can see, the platforms that are designed for collaborative writing, like Google Docs and Microsoft Word now, that also allows you to do that, you cannot edit text in most of the other ones, except for that small exception I showed you yesterday in collaborative learning notes that allows teachers to go in and edit things after they've already been published and released to their students. So this is kind of a cool thing, and if you're planning on, for example, giving out assignments to your students and later on perhaps wanting to edit them for some reason, maybe for incorporating student reflections in the original piece or something like that, in that case you'd want to use collaborative learning notes. Otherwise, most of these platforms do not allow any kind of editing, again, which is a good thing. Now let's talk about types of annotations here. So one big difference in the platforms is hand-drawn annotations. And you can see here that most of these platforms do not allow for hand-drawn annotations. However, when we get to ones like Commiap gives you the ability to draw in annotations or also hand draw in responses to annotations. And also, to an extent, we have like Google Docs that allows you to draw lines, which I guess you could use as an annotation in a way. But then some of the other ones, for example, of course, Jamboard is basically designed for this kind of hand drawing, in addition to Microsoft Word and OneNote, which also give you that option. But I think those ones were more so designed for using things like a digital pen that you can write directly in something with. So next up, what about pictures? Can we annotate with pictures? Well, we can do that in the first 5 here. You can see here that we can bring in pictures in Commiap, Feedbackfruits, Hypothesis, Collaborative Learning Notes, and Perusall. However, in Google Docs and Microsoft Word, they don't allow you to annotate with a picture. You could, of course, insert a picture, but not in the actual annotation box. That only allows for text and possibly links and things like that as well. Now, voice annotations were pretty rare, and so we can see here that it was really only available in 2 of these platforms, in Commiap and Perusall. Now, we could also argue that it's also available in Microsoft OneNote. However, it's not really a direct annotation or response to annotation. So I put yes with a question mark, but I'd argue that I wouldn't really count it at the same level as I'm counting the other ones here. Now, annotating with videos proved to be a lot more popular and common than annotating with audio. And as you can see here, it was supported by quite a few of these platforms. So we have video supported by Commiap, Hypothesis, Collaborative Learning Notes, and Perusall. However, it was not something that we could do in Feedbackfruits, and it also was something that was not possible in the Google Suite or the Microsoft Suite. Now, completion conditions are really great if you want to be able to make your grading job easier, and a lot of these platforms did offer some options. So we had that in Commiap. Again, this is something I mentioned earlier. Commiap conditions were pretty much made in the learning management system. So if you wanted to have your students do a certain amount of annotations or something like that, that would be something you would specify, for example, in Canvas. However, some of the other platforms had it built right into the platform. So in Feedbackfruits and Hypothesis, and also in Perusall, there were some completion conditions that you could assign. And in Perusall, there was even a really high-tech sort of auto grading system that went through and graded the annotations based on length and quality and all kinds of things, which was quite interesting. Now, in terms of having a built-in dictionary and multilingual functionality, really this narrows down the platforms here. So we have that available in CommiApp, in Collaborative Learning Notes, and of course in Google Docs and the Microsoft Suite, they also have access to their own built-in translation programs. However, out of all of these, the only one that had a really robust multilingual dictionary system was Collaborative Learning Notes. So that's something to consider if you're doing multilingual classes or maybe classes with students from all over the world, international students. Finally, the ability to annotate pictures, and this is something that I mentioned earlier, being able to bring in picture files and annotate them. And this is something that was only doable in a few of these platforms, so in CommiApp and Perusall and the Google Suite products and in the Microsoft Suite products. However, in terms of legitimately annotating a picture, I would say that was something that's really only possible in CommiApp, because in Perusall, their feature that is supposed to do that was broken when I tried it. And I couldn't see it in their interface, so I'm not sure if it even exists anymore. And when we're working with the Google Suite and Microsoft Suite, the annotation process is not so much direct, like you would have to manually draw arrows to the picture in order to annotate it and things like that. All right, so that's all the platforms. I hope that knowing all of this information will help you make some decisions on which platform is going to work best for you in your classroom. Again, not one of these platforms is the best at everything. All of these platforms have some weaknesses, have some advantages, and all of them are designed for specific niche purposes. So again, for example, things like CommiApp is great for younger students. It works really well if you have students who are very graphic oriented. And that's something that, again, really big advantage. Collaborative Learning Notes, really great for classes with international students, with multilingual backgrounds and things like that, or if you're trying to cover stuff that maybe isn't in English. And then the rest of them for general collaborative annotation, some of them with great grading features, some of them that just work with more learning management systems. Again, these are things that you need to take into account before you decide which one you end up using. All right, so now I'm going to go and explore some other feature or function that teachers want to do with EdTech. And if you have any ideas, things that you'd like to see me do in this channel, let me know. What are the challenges you're facing that you'd like to try to solve with some EdTech products? And I can go in, compare them, we can do some videos, and find out which ones will work best for you. If you enjoyed this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you know any colleagues that could benefit from this, and I see a lot of teachers on all the forums, on Twitter, on Facebook, every day asking about this stuff, please share this with them, let them know about it, and hopefully I can help them as well. So once again, I am Adam, your personal EdTech specialist, and stay healthy.